Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is the Livestream Q&A for the BAMPFA Student Committee Film Festival. The BAMPFA Student Committee Film Festival 2021 presents a diverse range of student-made films from Berkeley and across the Bay Area. You can watch all of these works on either the bampfa.org website or the separate Student Committee website, which will be up through till May 31st. Tonight, we are joined by these talented student filmmakers for a conversation about their work. Please feel free to join in the conversation by asking questions in the chat, which we can then ask each of the filmmakers. I'm Collette Keating. I'm a third year and the film chair of the BAMPFA Student Committee, and I'll be one of our mediators. I'll be joined by another student committee mediator, Amaris, who is gonna start us off by asking our first question.
Hi, so our first question is for Big House filmmaker Allison Lopez. You mentioned in the description of your film that this is a very personal project inspired by your childhood home. And can I ask where the film actually was shot? Is this your childhood home we're seeing? And if not, how did you choose the actual location and bring out the same memories and sensations of your childhood home in the space?
Yeah, so it was actually shot in San Francisco at the Arts Collective Convent on, I think it was Oak, but a friend of mine had been living there, so it is in my childhood home, but it very much was similar in like that way that it had so many hallways and or corridors and windows and stairs, and it made it easier to film my storyboard there because it was so similar. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll probably move through each of our questions and then we can always come back and please feel free to share at any point. So our next question is for 9/9/2020 Oakland for Gavin Richard, or it's about 9/9/2020 Oakland for Gavin Richard. Your work contains these really compelling aerial shots of Oakland as this kind of like smoky apocalyptic fire escape. I was wondering if you think filming with the drone brought the strange beauty of this day closer or farther to you. Like for me, it's very abstract and surreal, but I was wondering if the process of filming and being in control kind of brings you closer to the images at all.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned like closeness because initially I got out my DSLR and was shooting, like you could see in the first half is mostly DSLR stuff. Um, but I felt like, and I was going to do, the main reason that I like was ready to go that day was that I already had other drone shoots that day. So I said I had my drone handy. So I was like, I definitely should get drone shots, especially photos. If I could get like a whole bunch of photos from downtown Oakland. But the thing about the drone shots that I think really added to the film was the fact that you get closer to the sky, you have more connection to the sky. And I feel like that was the main sort of thing that happened that day that was really impactful for a lot of people, was that the sky was completely shrouded in like red clouds. And so I feel like, yeah, the drone definitely gave you this more closest to the sky, whereas like all my DSLR shots, it feels like a distance, between the sky, and you don't really get the full effect. You just kind of feel, I guess, just like the ground level sort of dismalness of it. I feel like the drone sort of showed you the full scope of what was going on that day.
I totally felt that.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is for Beyond the Storm director, Doi Lee. As a Vietnamese filmmaker, how personal was this project to you? Were you affected by these storms, or was this an opportunity for you to learn more about people's experiences with them as well?
Yeah, I think being a Vietnamese and growing up with those people, because those people are like my neighbors. The story felt very important to me. That is being told and known across the world, and also I'm very interested in climate change and all that stuff. And I decided to make a film that will show people the real what climate change is doing to the rural people, and people in Vietnam who, you don't really get to tell those stories when you're in the US or even like know about them. So I just want to, yeah. Okay. I'm sorry, I just woke up.
No worries. I bet you're tired. I totally get it. They were really powerful. I really appreciate you sharing. Okay, our next question is for Annie, Annie Cheng, filmmaker of Danny. I wanted to ask, you sculpt such a specific mood and story through your interaction with interior spaces. I was wondering what your relationship might be to these different spaces, such as that of the apartment, and how it is reflected in your storytelling.
So that it has a lot to do with my memory, like where it takes place. And as you said that because it's attached to myself, and like the how the film it was created, a tone, it has a lot to do with the color and the sound and the non-dialogue, and I did so. So I think the pacing also has a lot to do with it. Like sometimes when we were at the stage of how we've been very emotional, we kind of get stuck there, and you kind of become like it's a still. And like the friend itself that I create in this film is like the friend within a friend, and the characters is also on the very side angle, and it creates a very loneliness feeling in this piece, which I think is very powerful to for this film. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is for Amber Fenton. So one of the most charming aspects of Gesundheit is how it does play with the geography and features of the Bay Area. What was the process for you in selecting locations for your character to pop into?
Well, I really like North Beach, and so I wanted to have make a film based in that location and kind of where I spend most of my time because my school was based in that location. And I also wanted to use the really interesting architecture of that building that my school was based in, like in the teleportation shot where it's looking up from up at the like courtyard area, or the quad area. I really liked the high angles and just the lines that the lines that San Francisco and the building together like presented. Yeah.
Thank you. And I guess just going off of that, because the interesting architecture and geography plays so much into the film, was in the process of creating the film, which came first, the concept or trying to find a way to feature all of these locations?
Definitely the concept. It came from a school project that we had to write 100 film ideas, and I just chose the one that spoke to me the most in that moment, which was to make sort of like a comedic film. Sorry. Yeah, and so it really, the whole film was based on this one phrase of someone sneezes and someone else teleports. So that's the idea. I'm very fascinated with teleportation as well. I've always been my entire life. Sorry for my dog. Yeah, so definitely the idea came first.
Thank you. Yeah, and you're all good. Our next question is for director of Heart Whispers, Ash Veerwal. So this project follows you over the course of, is it 3 years? Over a long time, which is really amazing. So how long were you working on this project? And when you started filming, did you have a vision for the end product? Basically, can you tell us a bit about the process of the film coming into being?
Yeah, okay, so I'm Ash Veerwal. I made Heart Whispers, a short career documentary. I kind of never thought I would be making this film, but the pandemic kind of got me stuck inside with my footage that I had from like throughout my life. So I kind of just had the chance to review it all and make my story out of it. So it was pretty much only 2020 that I just reviewed all of the footage from my life and like found the film. So
I had one more question about that. I was wondering if you feel like, because it is so much footage from your life, as if you could keep continuing it, moving it forward, or if it does feel like, I mean, it is a completed work, it works perfectly in tandem, but I was just wondering how it might relate to other things that you're working on in your life or your own footage that you're taking.
yeah, I actually am planning on making it like an episodic series, because it ends with like just me saying my name a lot and saying like, this is Ash, like I'm Ash. And I'm like into exploring concepts of like consciousness and stuff like that. So in next films, I plan to like ask more of the question, like, what is Ash? Like, who is Ash? Like, what does that label mean? And what do our names mean in the whole like framework of the world and like society and stuff like that. So
Cool, thank you so much. I think our next question is for House of Little Wings directors Jess and Brandon. Jess, in your bio, you mentioned your desire to reimagine immigrant narratives, and Brandon, your interest in migration and indigenous dispossession. What types of images or stories do you find yourself seeking out to sculpt these narratives? How did focusing on Casalitas feel like an important entry point into discussions around immigration and disempowerment? Please, either of you feel free to talk.
Hey everyone, my name is Jess. Brandon and I did House of Little Wings. To your first question, talking about reimagining Central American narratives, a big part of that and a big part of like my artistic and journalistic journey is to portray Central Americans in a different light. And to be able to capture the plight, but also their humanness, and to be able to give agency within the story. So how Brandon and I approached the film was seeing the people that we documenting as collaborators rather than as like subjects or people that we're just taking a story from. And we really worked on building a relationship with them and just communicating with them throughout the process.
Amazing. Okay, thank you. We have another question from the chat from viewer Victor Suarez. He says he's curious to know how long the team spent on the ground there and why you decided to use narration.
Yeah, I can address that question. Thanks, Vic, for your question. We spent, well, I think Jess and I kind of over the course of about a year and a half, built a lot of relationships at Casalitas with the volunteers, the staff there, and folks as they were coming through, because their time at Casalitas is usually pretty limited. It falls between when they come out of Customs and Border Protection custody and when they're able to make travel arrangements to reunite with their families in different parts of the United States. But our time on the ground was limited to 2 weeks just because of production constraints. I think we both would have liked to spend more time on the ground on and off. But to the question about narration and just kind of using that as a, I guess, a vehicle for the narrative, I think we would have loved to tell this as a verite-driven piece. We played around with that a little bit in the edit. I think when it came down to it, there was a lot of really important reporting. You know, if we can all kind of take ourselves back in time to 2019, you know, it took a few months, but journalists and the media, people in the United States more broadly, were just starting to understand the implications of the Remain in Mexico policy and really the severity of the conditions in custody for people, both in Customs and Border Protection custody, but also in ICE custody. And we felt that there was a lot of really important context that people needed to really understand the circumstances that the families that you were seeing were surviving, were living, you know, as they were coming out of custody. And so the choice to include narration was just really a matter of giving that context and trying to help people understand that people were dying, that people still are dying, in detention, in custody. And that's just how we had to do it at the end of the day.
Makes sense. Thank you. Now we're going to move to some questions for the directors of the Lung. So we have a few in the live stream chat and a couple for you. So first we want to ask about the central feature of your film, which is the exhibition of a machine learning tool that transfers videos into moving paintings. Did you develop this program, or can you tell us a bit more about it and how it works with your film?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Oh, about the machine learning tool that transfers videos into moving paintings. Can you just, I guess, tell us a bit more about it?
Oh, right. So we were using a piece of software called Runway, which is for online creators interested in machine learning and using machine learning to make various pieces of art. What the process was essentially gathering footage and running it through the style transfer for the computer to essentially make a moving painting, and then compiling that alongside a song, which was a cover of the song "The Lung" by Hiatus Coyote, performed by Mwami.
Yeah, and to kind of add on to that, in the technical process, we're kind of stretching the tool of runway.ml. So we're using an adaptive style transfer model, which is basically there's a data set of paintings, and then you take like whatever video you've recorded, and then or image, and then you input it, and then it runs it through this model that takes like basically the entire data set of pick any artist, Picasso, Monet, and we chose Monet because it just turned out prettier, and in the style transfer, not in terms of their art. And then it crafted this moving image that was in relation to all of their paintings. And that's the output of what you see in the lung. And we used different landscape videos that we found were modeled best. And those that were modeled best were usually landscapes that Monet had painted before. But these are landscapes of now. So throughout the film, you can see hurricanes that are occurring in, for example, Puerto Rico, ripping off a roof. And those are things that Monet hasn't painted. And those are things that are happening right now.
Yeah. Should we talk say space? There's also a couple of shots from space, which Monet never painted, but we added in to just hopefully tie in more along the overall message of the piece.
I love that. And then we also have a question from Joel Marsden. How do you think art can affect real social change?
I think we're living in a time where the tools to art are like more accessible than they've ever been. Creators, anyone just starting out can either like Google YouTube tutorial to have access to some kind of academy, or even just do something like play around with an app the same way that we did, and say something. And accumulatively, if there is enough of a drive amongst their peers, amongst a community, people are able to actually say things that are meaningful and and make change.
Great, thank you. We have two questions in the chat about the music in the long. One asking if the song informed the kind of images you chose to feature, and another asking about the process of visualizing music, like incorporating tempo and different beats.
Okay.
In terms of tempo, it's interesting that you asked that, because the basis of our visual, I guess, translation of music of the song that Wami created was through a poem that actually Imran made. And so that was kind of the basis of selecting the imagery. I don't know if you would like to recite it, or if you don't.
Yeah, and also like in tandem, the idea for most of the shots was to have it be, you know, slow to some extent and also digestible. I think maybe also to a previous point, there was, I think, one risk that we ran in when we were trying to like convey just like ideas of, you know, environmental concern, then how this will touch on people or maybe make someone feel something, to not run the risk of getting to something like quote unquote trauma porn, right? And how can you almost come to some kind of meditation about these bigger, more universal things that like we're facing, which is like the earth. And there is like a tie-in with the body and with this, the lung. The idea is that the earth breathes us, and originally with the song, I think the inspiration, Napalm from Hiatus Coyote, was talking about astronauts in space and how their lungs change shape. They change their dimensions when they're out in space. And that was very much an inspiration for the song itself. And it evokes many images. It's one of the reasons why it was an inspiration for Wami to do a cover. And off of that, something for us to work with. I made a poem as well. But we don't have to.
We don't have to recite. It's okay. It's okay.
No.
Yeah. Also, yeah. Just to add on to that, we created this during quarantine, the height of it. So our footage was definitely like skewed towards like what we could obtain copyright free online, and also just from our own, you know, personal database. So yeah, that's kind of where all the footage came from.
Thank you both so much. I'd love to hear about it. I think our next question is for Marcy Vargas and Eric Nuding, the filmmakers of Telepatia. You mentioned that Telepatia is a reimagining of family history. What was it like to view and review archival footage or images that was close to you? I think that one's for myself, I'm not sure which one. And then how did you feel you were able to reshape and retell them? Was there something tender or cathartic in this process? Do you feel like it connected you more to the medium? So basically, how are you able to shape your own histories or remake them through this process?
Thank you for that introduction. Yeah, I didn't notice how much archival footage my grandpa got of me when I was a kid until he started sharing it with me during quarantine. And I think, I mean, throughout our lives, we kind of just start connecting with our past differently the more we tell our stories. So that's definitely something that I've been doing in the past 2 years. And with the archival footage, kind of just telling Eric's stories about my childhood, I started noticing how I was connecting to those memories and to the people that were in all of those videos. So it was a great way of connecting all of those videos and sort them in a way where it made sense to me again, because they didn't really have a pattern before, but definitely they were created. And it kind of was healing in a way. Towards the end of the film, my connection with my mom and how we've always felt very connected through this like mutual telepathy we feel. So that's, you know, the given name.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, this was such personal footage to Marseille. So I think my job was to try to stay as close to the material as possible and not to cheapen it with material that was like outside of the like immediate sphere of those images, you know. And I think something that Ash and a couple other people were saying was, you know, the pandemic is especially a time when we're reflecting and going through old photo books and old home videos to stop and reflect. Yeah, and you know, Marseille told me this, you know, amazing story about this this like vision or dream that she had, right? And it's something that we could never possibly reproduce with voiceover or telling it again. So, you know, that's when thinking about how, you know, film form can say something that we can't say otherwise, you know, and how film can communicate something through telepathy, you know, that couldn't be said. So, yeah.
Thank you. Speaking of, I guess, pandemic filmmaking, I have a question for I'll Be Here director Christopher Thatch. So I'll Be Here takes place primarily in the home. And am I correct in assuming that all the actors are your family members? And how did the present pandemic situation affect your inspiration for and the production of this film?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, all of the people in the film is my family, and I made that at the peak of the pandemic, and I'm not even gonna lie, I made that for my film school application, and I had a totally different film where it was just me, and it just didn't work out. So I had 1 week left, and I didn't want to work with my family, but then like last second, I was like, you know what? I think we can do it. And, you know, like I filmed like every day of that week and it worked out. But yeah, they're just all my family.
Your sister is such a good actress. I was rewatching that. I was just really impressed. It's sometimes so hard. I'm assuming she's your sister,
Yeah,
but
she's great.
yeah, she was so good. I was really amazed. I was also wondering, there are these kind of emotive, lengthy pauses in the work, and how you kind of conceptualize those in the story, and like they really connected to me with like the feelings of disconnection and connection that you're kind of like articulating. So I was just kind of wondering how you were doing that within the structure of the film.
Yeah, I think because I like the whole concept happened within a week, but it was kind of like me and my sister like even like fleshing out how she would react or like how her character might react in those like beats of like silence. And like I think the film's like 6 minutes. So the version I submitted to film schools where it was 5 minutes and I didn't like it. But like I always felt like it needed to be longer, but people kept telling me like the pacing's great. At 5 minutes it's great. I was like, no, it needs to be longer, dude. But yeah, I guess like finding those and like kind of even kind of like with the music to like like the music in the beginning to like feel like the deadness in the house and the like after an argument and how it's just like dead silent and the people on other sides of the house and stuff like that. But yeah.
I thought it was super effective. Yeah, it really worked.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we have a question in the chat for Jess and Brandon, who Jose Moreno says that they love the ethos of the film subjects as collaborators. As collaborators, how did the perspective of the migrant subjects subjects of the film shape the final cut?
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about the filming of it. So one of the processes that was really important was consent, especially informed consent with these were migrants that had just been released from CBP detention facilities, or not CBP facilities. And so it was a lot of like informed consent, and it was a lot of checking in with folks like, is this okay? Is this not? Is this okay? And it was always like, even if it's okay if I like come into the room, am I too close? Things like that. And we actually, there were some really important scenes that we missed because we we thought it was more important to consider the person's humanity and understand that the moment was really intense for them. So, but it eventually, like, we were able to create a deeper relationship with them, and it showed why the film was so intimate. Is because they trusted us in that process. They trusted that we were going to be communicating and throughout with them the entire time.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, you know, the point in this question about subjects, I think, like, we would call them collaborators and sources in the film shaping the final cut. You know, when it came to the edit, I think it was really important to Jess and I to really reflect on what the experience was of actually, like, you know, beyond just like holding a camera, holding a boom, like asking questions over those 2 weeks. It was really about reflecting on what was this person actually telling us about what they were going through, rather than like, what is the most sensational thing that we got on camera? Because I think one of the pitfalls, and something that we see really commonly in observational verite as a style, which, you know, like I said, we went in with the intention of trying to produce a verite driven piece. One of the pitfalls can be that, you know, a producer or director will run with kind of the biggest shock value, or the thing that will draw out the most emotion, but that isn't always necessarily, I think, representative of someone's experience. And so I think what Jess is getting at in building these relationships and having informed consent and really viewing someone as a collaborator is really understanding what their experience is, really having honest conversations about that with them and then amongst ourselves as filmmakers, and then trying to reflect that in the edit. So I really like to think, you know, for both of us, that the feelings you walk away with, and I think like the intensity of you know, Marvin, Imelda, Glendy, Marina, Jocelyn, like, I think the feelings that you get about what their experience was at Casalitas after coming out of custody is hopefully really representative or reflective of how they would describe that. And so I think, to answer the question directly, it really is about collaboration and really trying to embody the emotions that someone is telling you that they're feeling, and really trusting in that as a filmmaker.
Thank you. I think that definitely comes through. And I guess going off of that, how did your subject collaborators feel about the film? Were they excited or hesitant, and did they get to see the final cut?
Yeah, we were in like constant communication with Glendy and like her family for sure, and everyone. One of the ways that we built trust with Glendy's family was showing her previous films that we had. done already. And so that was like part of the conversation with her, just showing us like, this is the work that we've done, and in order to build trust, because that was key throughout the entire process. And they did, we sent it to them at the end, and we're really excited about it.
Thank you. So our next question is for Lemon Cake director Sepide. Your sorry, your film really wonderfully captures the very specific style and era of Black and white silent films. Could you tell us a bit about why you chose to create a film in this style, and how it kind of informs the overall themes of the film?
Yeah, actually, I have been fascinated with silence era and German expressionist for all my life. And I was always wishing to make a film like Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and, and all those Last Laugh and all those really masterpieces of cinema. So when I decided late in life to go back to school and go back to cinema school, I said, I'm going to make a silent film. And as someone who was going back at a later age, I was dealing with age issue. And I always, and our society always makes the older women invisible. And and then I wanted to make this as a joke, and combining the style of the silent and this as like such a melodramatic self-pity of this woman, make it like, okay, you can have your own, you can change your own self-reflection by looking at the mirror of your own mirror rather than the mirror society gives you. So that was the theme of the film.
I know you're a playwright. I was wondering how that inflected your making of the film, if you feel like it did at all.
Yeah, actually, to be a playwright means you have to use lots of words. So, so I really wanted to do something different. So I wanted to work on images, but sometimes I have been criticized for having lots of intertitles. And I always attributed to, I was a playwright, I don't know how to cut words. So yeah, it helped me in terms of having the story, the beginning, the middle, the end of kind of like the classic way of the thing. And I tried to work against my nature of a playwright. So anyway, yeah.
Well, it worked out very well. It was enjoyable to watch.
Thank you.
You were talking about using humor, so I guess I can also ask, I was going to ask Amber about how you think playfulness and humor of your work help you better understand the space of the city and the world at large. But Sepide, also feel free to, if you want to talk more about your own use of humor. Okay.
No, I just thought this whole story cannot be a melodramatic story. It's just a joke. So anyway, yeah.
Oh, but Amber, I was going to ask you.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I wasn't sure.
No worries. How you think the playful and humor of your work helped you better understand and navigate the space of the city and the world at large?
Well, I've always been the type of person to like default to humorous like stories and stuff like that, and like also just living in like big cities my entire life, I've always seen such weird things happening, or like people tripping and no one really noticing except me, and like, just things like that you just see in like the city life that you don't really necessarily see in like the suburbs. And I really just wanted to like capture humor in like a city environment while still making it seem kind of like everyday life. So that's what I tried to do with this film. And I'm also working on a short like video film. It's not really a short film, but it's just like a little school project that I'm doing about one of my roommates who's going on a run, and like about like her kind of like anxiety like expressing itself through humor in like her daily runs. So that'll also be in the city. It's going to tie into the film in this festival like very closely visually. So yeah.
That's so fun. Speaking also of kind of interaction with spaces, I know a few of our films kind of dealt with that, but I wanted to ask Annie about Danny and how it speaks worlds often without needing to speak at all. In fact, there is such beauty in its silences and its long moments of quiet. So I was wondering kind of what the process of writing was like for this film, and then how the moments of silence speak or figure for you in your own life and work.
So the silence that is showing in the films is actually being made during the editing. So it's actually there was a dialogue when I was written out the film, but like I always feel like the version that we wrote in on the script is one version, but the film itself that after the edit is something else. I just feel that there's no need to have the dialogue and the emotion itself already give the character and the audience. It's way much powerful than having dialogue to being told to express the feeling itself. And the another choice of me using non-dialogue, because I feel it personally myself, I don't really easily express feeling with vocal easily for me. And when I grew up, I tend to play piano, so emotional is something that connect with me like through like music, soundtrack, some visual images instead of words. So I think that's the reason why I think there's something else more powerful than using dialogue, like the soundtrack or the visual or the small gesture or the facial expression for the protagonist. That could be another powerful way to make the film. Thank you.
Absolutely. And then I had another question for Doi about your work. I was going to say so much of the power and force of your work was how visceral it was, and how well you were able to recreate the feeling of Central Vietnam. I was wondering what it was like representing your individual and the collective experience there. I was impacted a lot by the soundscape, and I was wondering if there were specific elements of the film process you felt like you were able to use to give truth to your experience and the experience there.
I'm sorry, the question was kind of long. I was distracted. I'm so sorry.
No. I was just wondering if there were specific elements of film that you felt like you used to help kind of like document your experience in Central Vietnam and what that's like, and reproduce that on screen.
Yeah, so like everything was done on location. We had to use the sound we had to record the sound from on location, and it was like a two days shooting period, and the weather was horrible. Like, yeah, we had to do a lot of prep work for the cameras, and also the area, the location that I had to work in. It was also like very horrible because it was muddy. It was a stormy season, and yeah, it was rough working in that environment. But when you get to sit down and actually listen to those people talking, it gets very emotional, and it's very powerful, and these are the people that I grew up with. So I just kind of do kind of wanted to do something that, you know, represents who I am and how I grew up. Yeah, I just, okay, that's all I had to say. I don't know.
Thank you. Yeah, it was super powerful. And just hearing those people speak was, yeah, I don't know, the way that I think you melded the space and the people worked really well.
Thank you.
I had another question for Allison. I was wondering if you felt like so much of your work is this like visual poetry, and I was kind of wondering if you feel like you're shaping the space around you with the camera, and I know you're talking about recreating the space of your childhood home, or if you feel like the camera is kind of mediating for you, so what your relationship is in filming these spaces, if you're framing them or if you feel like they're framing your experience.
Yeah, I really liked how you mentioned how they're framing my experience, because it was very much me just putting myself in this space and on my storyboard, but really feeling what I wanted to express and how I could express it. I think the process for me really started with choosing, asking myself what a place or person or a concept or idea really evoked a lot of feelings and emotion out of myself. So what that was for me was my childhood home. And I think this space, this building really like allowed me to express that story. But it was very much like the convent itself was really creepy to begin with, because it was such an old building, and before so many other artists had lived there were nuns living there, and there was like a whole section of it that had like there was a church part of it, so yeah, aisles and all that, and a podium, but so yeah, I think the space allowed me to tell my story in a creepy way, in a way that maybe was uncomfortable and like gave people anxiety or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I kind of like went off the question in a weird way. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing the history. That is actually really amazing. But we have a question for the chat, also from the chat for you, asking, is there a narrative in this film in your mind, or is it purely experimental? And how does it inspire your future work?
Yeah, I think my whole idea was to prevent a narrative from forming. I really, at the time that I was creating this, a couple months before actually, I really learned a lot from Sergei Eisenstein and the whole montage juxtaposition of shots and how that creates meaning theory. And so I really ran with that and asked myself these questions of what feelings were strong enough to express visually and sonically. And I think this inspires my future work just because the process that I had for this film, I think, is a good one for me. Just starting from within and starting with, yeah, like an idea or concept. But yeah, there was no narrative in mind. It was purely experimental.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that the influences montage theory really comes through. And speaking of, I guess, imagery, I have a question for the directors of Telepatia about the microscopic and biological imagery in the film. How does that kind of work with the archival film? Can you speak on that?
Yeah, sure. So this was that imagery was kind of one of the few ways we wanted to transcend what was already there, whilst kind of trying to stay cohesive to the like aesthetic that we were creating through the VHS imagery. Yeah, so I guess that was like the dream sequence element, in which we accomplish something that isn't possible, which is to go back to the source of everything, and say something as an unborn child to someone's mother. So yeah.
I was also wondering what relationship you felt like it built to the images now, adding stuff to them. Like, did you feel now that it does feel like they're more of dream images? Do they still feel archival at all? Just kind of how that shaped a different relationship to them.
Yeah, so, it's difficult to explain how all of those images came about, because it's different to see the actual footage than what you have in your mind of how those people look like, or what you used to listen to have that sequence, and adding on the womb, like, and also like the other part of the video where my mother is swimming in the ocean. It just makes it more real in a sense. It's kind of funny how, even though it's dreamlike, it makes it more real of what I used to imagine it being like. And so just this whole notion of her relationship and eyes, and how we do have telepathy, it kind of validates it with this movie.
Yeah, and just going off of that, like, what's so fascinating is, like, how does making this film contribute to the ongoing memory, which is always changing, of these events and of this time, and now these images kind of maybe take us off in, a different fork onto the kind of the multitude of like ways that we, change the way we see things constantly as time passes. That's really what I was so, fascinated by.
Thank you. And going off, I guess, the idea of archival footage and reconstruction, I have a question for Ash. So in a way, Heart Whispers kind of is a product built of archival footage. When you were constructing the film, did you feel that you were giving new meaning to the footage, or what was like your relationship with the footage as you made it into the film?
Actually, yeah, that was a complicated relationship because I had to go back and look into all of this past stuff. But yeah, I guess I did just put intention to not exposing all the things that maybe would be like marketable, but just exposing like things about like the body, or medicalizing the trans story. So I just made it very focused on like the internal struggle and like transformation and shifts in outlook on life and stuff like that. So yeah, I guess I never really looked at that footage as like archival, but I guess it is because it is like from my archive. So yeah, that's a cool question. Thanks.
I was also wondering kind of how you're able to use abstraction, or how you feel like you might be using abstraction or like mediation, overlaying of images to kind of like wondering if you're doing that to like depict your relationship or experience with these spaces, and kind of if you could talk about that process.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely feel like abstraction and like just overlaying multiple layers of meaning can create a way to kind of express how we feel. Yeah, I this is also kind of like Alice, who is in this like student thing as well. She like also inspires me to like look at dreams in a way, look at films and dreams in a similar way, to where like it just is like expressing like an inner experience that you can't really just see in like the physical world, but you like create it through like all this abstraction. So yeah, and I definitely will be am doing that in my future work. So yeah.
And then I think this might be one of our last questions since we are coming up on our hour. But this one's for Gavin. I was wondering kind of about how the drone kind of restructures your memory and your relationship to like the space and time of the places that you are shooting, and kind of how that comes about in your film and like what that brings to it.
That's an interesting question. Like through doing all like my drone work in the past, what people always come away with is they say the world looks so different from the drone. And like flying the drone, especially like nowadays, it's so common in film and TV drone shots, just because of the convenience of it. Um, but like, it's almost like its own kind of language. You kind of have to like, especially if you're doing it, I feel like, most of my short film, like 2/3 of it was drone footage. You kind of have to, it's not like, oh, well, what shots did we get on the ground? Let's just put them in the sky. It's kind of, you have to figure out like what works, what doesn't work. The fact that it gives people like the sensation of flight, you have to address that. You can't make them like too nauseated or whatever. And all the shots are stable. I mean, now they're making more drones that are like mimicking kind of handheld action footage, but like drone shots by and large now are all on a gimbal and they're very steady and stuff like that. So, a lot of it is like, keeping the path of the drone, having some variety to it, making sure that people are still engaged and it's not just kind of redundant drone shots. What people get caught up in, especially with drone things, is because it's so fun to fly them, you forget that you're filming and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to get a shot. Like I have to make sure that I'm framing stuff. I have to make sure that this looks coordinated to some extent, because flying it is honestly half of it, especially that day. Even though for us it looked like daytime, it was like nighttime. Like it was so dark. I had to put my shutter up all the way up, ISO, bump it up. But yeah, flying it is very dangerous, especially when it's like, the whole state is on fire. It's not really very safe. So you have to keep that in mind. And then on top of that, you have to just kind of think about, framing, and it's basically another camera technology entirely. So it's not like you can just think about, oh, I want to get this kind of shot that I would get on the ground. You kind of have to just fly and get experience and think about those things after you've done it for a while, just getting out there and flying and getting that experience.
Cool. Thank you so much. It was really cool to hear about. So I think before we go really quickly, Kate brought up to me, maybe we can all turn on our cameras so we can get just like a quick group shot if you feel comfortable doing that. I want to say thank you all so much for coming out. We really thoroughly enjoyed getting to view your works and getting to talk to you about them. It was really such a pleasure. Yeah, thank you so much for just creating, and we're so happy to have you as the audience members. I hope that you get have already had a chance to listen to these works or to watch all these works. And if you haven't, I highly recommend. They are on the BAMPFA.org website and on a separate student committee website, which I'm sure are in the chat. Yeah, thank you all so much for coming out again. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you.